That's okay. I was glad to see it. She's here. She's. Good morning. It is February 11th, or excuse me, May 11th, and it's our regular board meeting. And we have a full slate of commissioners here in the chamber. So if you would call the meeting to order, and if you'll please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, with that, I see Nicole is in the room. And the first order of business, though, is for the commissioner and the updates. So we'll start with you, Keith, Administrator.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, the board approved creation of a redistricting commission. We've sent out letters to each of the groups and individuals that the board had suggested participate in this. I've heard back from about half of them. I gave them till next Wednesday, I think, to respond. So I still have a couple to hear from. But as soon as I get all of those in, we will convene an organizational meeting, basically review what the current status is and what the requirements of the Voting Rights Act entails, so that we can kind of level set for the entire organization and start working from there on new maps that will be hopefully finalized when we have good census data and be able to bring that before the board for final approval. So secondly, I think you're all aware that yesterday the U.S. Treasury released some guidance on the Recovery Act funds that are coming to Franklin County. I mentioned before, we have about $18.5 million over 2 years that we'll receive. We have about 3 years in which to engage in a plan to use those funds. I've got a 150-page document on my desk that I got yesterday. I haven't quite digested all of that yet, but it explains kind of the rules of what is allowed and permitted, and what kind of the intent of what's encouraged for local governments to use those funds for. So we will be having that discussion probably next week at our meeting to go in a little more detail of what the intent of the board is to use those. Those are the kind of the major things I've been focused on the last week. Obviously, we are very concerned with the potential rollback of Franklin County to a phase 2 status if we don't meet the standards that have been defined by the governor. As you know, last week we were anticipating that the governor might make a change, but he put everything on a pause and left us in phase 3 for the time being. We currently meet the standard on hospitalizations, but we don't meet the standard on transmission rates. Benton County barely missed both of those metrics, and so they're probably at a little bit more of a risk than we are. We're aware of the challenges that come if Franklin County and Benton County are not in the same phase. It really drives economic activity to the county that is open more than we are. So I can't predict what the governor's going to do. If they're going to make changes to those metrics. I do have a meeting scheduled with Jason Scaria from the Health Department and Benton County. We're going to be discussing those metrics and what the county positions look like. We'll either have that meeting later today or first thing tomorrow, but we're staying dialed in on that. I'm told that the governor is supposed to sign the bill related to the narcotics possession legislation that was passed. He's scheduled to sign that, I think, maybe today, but that may have an impact on our scheduled public hearing and ordinance that we have scheduled for the 18th. And for today, that's probably enough of what I've been spending most of my time with on all last week.
So on that signing of that, he does have the authorization for line item veto, right? We do got to keep an eye on the bill itself.
Yes, yeah. I don't know how much line item authority he has. to be honest with you. But we will certainly keep an eye on if the language should change in the bill.
Okay. Commissioner Peck?
So start with 5126. The bill is just being discussed. It is on the governor's desk. It is expected that he's going to sign it probably today. Some people thought he'd sign it yesterday. I don't know that this would fit in the bucket of a line item veto because it's not a subset of an existing statute. He probably could veto the entire thing, but I guess we'll wait and see what he chooses to do. That came out of a WASAC meeting yesterday that was a Zoom meeting. I saw that Commissioner Mullen was on there as well, and Keith was too. 5126 came up along with the $69 billion that the federal government is allocating directly to counties. It's worth noting that for a change, these funds are not going through the state, they're going directly to counties. And that's going to make it a little more difficult because the processes that are in place for distribution of this kind of funding aren't going to be used. It's not going to go through commerce the way it normally does at the state level. That's going to put an extra burden on Mr. Johnson to sort that out. There were two additional meetings yesterday, a NACO meeting and one with the federal government. I only caught portions of those two. I know Keith caught most of them, if not all of them. At a Greater Columbia Behavioral Health Exec Board meeting and also the board meeting. Nothing significant there to really report other than that the ASO is continuing to have its role and authorities overlapped by the health authority at the state. So in terms of responsibilities and funding, that's kind of an open question. Had a few more than usual constituent calls and requests for assistance this week. A couple of them were on permitting for projects, which I think we're all getting those calls. A couple of them were on land use issues in my district that were not permitting, had more to do with land use zoning and the rules for public entities selling property. It's not county property in this case, it's another taxing district. And had a couple of calls on the redistricting issue. Had a meeting with a local constituent of all three of ours who has announced her candidacy for the U.S. Senate. The portion that's of relevance to this meeting is going over county governance and how the county fits into the bigger picture of state and federal government. Had the COVID local decision makers briefing, the Benton Franklin Council of Governments. We had a credit board loan review committee meeting yesterday that got curtailed due to some issues with loan documents not being ready. And we're also working on a bylaws commission this week, rewriting the bylaws for the Benton Franklin Council of Governments. Usual staff calls, working on some opportunities, I would call them, in planning for process, but I think we're all involved in that, so that's not unique. That's probably good for today. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
Yes, I've had calls as far as getting building permits, the same as Mr. Peck had mentioned. And I believe that Matt Mahoney and his crew is going to step in and help out with that, getting some of the permits passed through. I sat in and chaired the meeting for the Ben Franklin Transit, and they have new project proposals, plans for 2022, renovation and expansion of Pasco's 22nd Street Avenue Transit Center. It's reached its end of life, and they have the design initiated and they're pending approval, and that's a $2.5 million project. And then also the transit hub and fleet maintenance base. Plans are for it to be placed adjacent to the previously approved West Pasco Transit Hub, and that also is a $6 million project. And we'll be voting on that, I believe, this week. So I have for updates.
And I too received a lot of phone calls from area businesses, people that are trying to get their projects started and have been sitting since January or before, and got a call from Matt Mahoney. So again, he has reassured me that they're in there and they're moving forward here, and they're going to get ahead of this thing and get caught up on all these permits and sites where people are trying to create more revenue for the county. Other than that, just Ben Franklin operation and maintenance was the only meeting I had for this last week. And we've got the Board of Health coming up on the 19th, and we have the Ben Franklin Transit meeting coming up this week. So it'll get busy here in this next couple of weeks for myself on meetings. So with that, we will move on to the comprehensive plan update. And Nicole, you're going to present.
Yes, good morning. And I brought some small binders with me this morning that I could leave with the clerk, or I could pass out to you now.
It's up to you if you want
If
to.
you're not opposed to it, I'll just pass them out now.
Yeah, if you want to hand them to me, I can just pass them down too.
They're not small.
Okay. Oh. All right, thank you.
Glad we didn't get the big one.
You tested on that after lunch.
Easy breezy.
Well, it's not actually a small binder because it's not a small task. But again, my name is Nicole Stickney. I'm here from AHBL, and just want to open by thanking you for the opportunity to assist with this comprehensive plan update project. We've been working on this for some time, coming to the ending parts, and it's just been great to work with county, hand in hand with your staff, your planning commission, subject matter experts that we've worked with, and of course the public that we've engaged throughout this process. So what I'm handing you today is a compilation of our work. This isn't all of the materials. There's a lot of information available on our website that we've been maintaining for this project. What I've printed is the materials that I thought you'd want to have at your fingertips. And then if you have additional information you'd like to look over, it's available online. I want to emphasize that there's nothing in these binders that isn't already available to the public on our project website. So this is just printing out some of those items. I have a copy of the binder for each of you three this morning. This is Keith's copy here that I'll be briefing you from. And then we'll provide 2 additional binders. One will stay at the Planning and Building Department for their access. And if they, depending on whether they're open or not, they can let people look at the binder if they're interested. Of course, materials are available online, but we want to make sure this is transparent to the public. And then 1 additional binder for the clerk's office here at the courthouse. So just to let you know what's in here, I've included under some tabbed items, just the things that I thought were most important that I could sacrifice trees to bring to you so you could see it all. Under tab 1 is the resolutions previously passed by the board. So this is the previous legislative actions pertaining to this update. A resolution to start the update process and pass a public participation plan. Another resolution that marked that we did not meet the statutory deadline, but we were working in earnest towards completing this project. And then also a resolution adopting the countywide planning policies that had not been updated since 1993. And then this board adopted them in the last year or so to update those policies, which provide a foundation for the Franklin County Comprehensive Plan, as well as those of the incorporated cities in the county. Under tab 2 is the actual draft comprehensive plan and several of the appendices. Some of them are still in development. For example, first appendix will be the actual ordinance adopting this plan once you move forward. But you'll see we've printed it out so that you can go through each element, read all of the language that's been prepared and reviewed by the Planning Commission in this public process. So last week, Tuesday evening, the Planning Commission did meet and they voted to recommend approval of this plan to this board. And so we didn't want to waste any time. This is the document we've been working on under tab 2. Following that, for supporting materials, tab 3 is important. It's called our response matrix. This is where we have detailed all of the comments we received in writing through the end of March. I've printed this out and it's lengthy. So we go through, it's 158 comments in total that we've summarized and we put our response to. For this document, I would recommend looking at it online. Go to the PDF. The reason is if you click on the links to the letters, you can view the actual letters if you'd like to that came in from different members of the public. So I think that'll be a useful tool.
Looks like FutureWise is the biggest contributor to the comment.
They have commented extensively and several times throughout the process. Yes, that's true. Tabs 4 and 5 are the applications that came in from the City of Connell and the City of Pasco. For the City of Pasco's application, I printed out the most important to put in this binder, but I've annotated where you can find the other materials. For example, they included their comprehensive plan in their application. So I didn't print that whole thing out. I printed the cover page of it and put the address where you can find it online. Same with their capital facilities plan. They're big documents. You could also request a copy and we'll get one for you, probably from their office to have them printed out. Following that, the SEPA documentation is in here for your view. And then a report from January, which gave a general highlight and summary to the Planning Commission before they proceeded on with their final tasks. So what isn't in this binder? There's a lot of materials. There's all the public notice that we put out. There's emails that we put out to a public parties list of interested parties. Keep the people abreast of the process. Those are all available if you need them. And like I mentioned, there's just so much on the website. We've got all of our PowerPoint presentations from past meetings. We've got some meeting summaries there and previous drafts. So you can see the previous markups if you want to. Oh, and another thing is the old or existing now comprehensive plan from 2008. That's available online, but I didn't print that out because we're moving off of that. We're going to the next one. Moving forward, what we'd like to do is come back the next couple Tuesday mornings and answer some questions you may have as you review this material. In particular, I'd like to come back and talk to you specifically about the Pasco UGA, unpack that a little bit, talk about the high points of, bottom line, what you need to know about the process that we went through and where things ended up in terms of the recommendation from the Planning Commission. I'll also highlight how we've ensured the protection of resource lands and agricultural lands. So to summarize, there's a massive public record. Hopefully this will be a good tool to you. I warn you not to read it too late at night. It will put you to sleep likely, but I'd say that also in jest because it's also very exciting because this is about the future of the county. And there's a lot of interesting, I think, data in here. We've got a compilation of maps. It's material that I enjoy, obviously. It's been a pleasure putting this together for you. And again, it is the future of this county, so it's very exciting in that regard. I just wanted to leave on one more note. This is a legislative action, so you're free to have all the conversations you want, and they do not need to be disclosed whatsoever. You're free to have all of those conversations, let anyone reach out to you with opinions on this, because this is a policy item. So you are not bound by the appearance of fairness doctrine. That would apply if it was a quasi-judicial matter. But the bottom line is this affects, I would say, almost everybody in the county and all the business owners in the county. So in terms of giving preferential treatment to one person or another, this is a huge policy change for the county to move into a new comprehensive planning phase. And so you don't have to worry about any of those items. Also, you can take as many meetings as you want to make a decision. I imagine you've probably heard from some folks already. There's a lot of folks ready for you to make a decision as soon as possible. There's a lot at stake, obviously. The city's looking forward to having their process completed because the city of Pasco, because they've gone through a long process. They're waiting for, of course, this board to make a final decision on their UGA because counties are the responsible entities for setting forth the boundaries of urban growth areas. So with that, thank you, and I'll be back. And June 1st in the evening is when we're planning to have a evening meeting to go over this, take public comment. It'll be at the HAPO Center. So that'll come up in just a couple of weeks. And like I said, in the meantime, we'll be answering questions. And first thing that I'll want to address is the land use element. So we'll go over that next week.
Nicole, where would someone from the public be able to go to our website and go to the planning department to find this?
Yes, on the planning department page, and I believe it's also just on the main county page. Yeah, it's still there. There's a link. It's a unique site. It's hosted by State of Washington. It's called an Easy View site, and it's a site that they make available for projects. You can put a lot of information up there. It's pretty easy to use. I've been maintaining that site for the county. So you would just click on the link to go to this Easy View site, and then there's tabs at the top and a lot of information. They can look at events and see all the different meeting announcements. Where I put links to like the YouTube videos of the Planning Commission meetings. So everything's sort of packaged there. You could access the materials that you're interested
And
in.
all this is in there.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Commissioners, any other questions? Keith, go ahead. You got something you'd like to say?
Yeah, I just, for the benefit of the public and as well commissioners as well, is just a little bit more on process. The board will have their evening public hearing on this June 1st. How soon can they make a decision to approve the updated plan? Can they do it that evening? Should they take time to deliberate over an extended period, or what's the legal requirement and then what's your recommendation?
So in terms of a legal requirement, we need to have an ordinance prepared that outlines the process and outlines the findings of this board to create the decision. So we'll have something drafted for that evening in case the board would like to continue forward following that public hearing. As long as you have a public hearing on this and you take in the public comment and you review the record of the Planning Commission, you're ready to take action at any time that you so choose. So if you wish to take action that night, that opportunity will be there. If you want to take action at a future meeting, that'll give us an opportunity, change anything in the ordinance that you might see, that sort of thing. But I'll circulate an advanced copy so that you can see what we've put together. What we want to make sure is that this ordinance will stand up and be legally defensible in the event of a appeal happening. So that's the important part that I'm looking out for. But certainly that you will be able to take action that night if you so choose. Otherwise, the following Tuesday, if you meet on June 1st, I think your next meeting would be June 8th. So you could vote that morning as well, if you prefer to hear the comment and then not take action immediately.
Once the board takes action, and let's just assume somebody challenges it through an appeal, walk us through a little bit of that process of what that looks like.
If this is appealed, it would have to be appealed to the Growth Management Hearings Board of Washington State within 60 days. So the time will start ticking once the ordinance is published. So typically five days or so after passage of an ordinance. So we'll publish a summary of the ordinance, and that will be the legislative action. That will be the cue to everyone that the time period has started. I want to emphasize that it would go to the Growth Management Hearings Board. Sometimes there's a confusion. People will perceive that the state of Washington has to approve this plan, and that is not the case. In the state of Oregon, where they have a different take on growth management, all of the county comprehensive plans are subject to approval by the state. Our shoreline management programs work that way. We have to get approval through ecology. But in this case, the Department of Commerce oversees growth management services. We've already communicated with them. We already have their comments on the record. We do have to send them a copy of the ordinance and the final document for their filing. but they don't have to approve our plan. There are many different entities that could appeal the plan. I won't go through all of that, but certainly, as you've noted, there's been public comment issued, and I believe some of that public comment may have been issued in order to reserve a repeal or an appeal opportunity by stakeholder groups. The Benton County Comprehensive Plan, when they passed it for their last periodic update, it was appealed. And then it was a lengthy process to get through that. And they ended up having a mediation agreement with FutureWise, who had appealed their comprehensive plan on the basis of rural water availability. That to me is not a area of vulnerability for Franklin County. We don't have adjudicated water rights. A different situation here certainly than Benton County. But the questions have been raised about protection of rural lands. So that's why I'll want to highlight that and talk about it next Tuesday so we can go over that specifically.
Yeah, that's one of the things I went to immediately was the wells and water rights. And I'm sort of looking through that and I see the Hearst decisions mentioned. So
Yeah,
there's still no limitation as far as 5,000 a day per household with a well, right? That all stays the same. Is there anything in here on monitoring wells, a monitoring device?
no.
Okay.
There is language about how we could condition plat approval on those limitations of water withdrawal to make sure it's consistent with the state requirements. One thing that I'll talk about next Tuesday is that the the urban growth area expansion proposed by the city of Pasco, it's really big. They haven't moved their line since 2008. So we have to keep this in mind. And while they had originally proposed an expansion that was over 5,000 acres, that's no longer on the table. It's a smaller footprint, but it is still a big expansion. And that's to accommodate 20 years worth of growth. And so you'll be able to look through their application and see how they formulated their request.
Any other questions?
I just have one question that relates to that urban growth boundary.
Mhm.
I understand that there were several options that had been presented to the city of Pasco, and in public discussion, they've been referred to as options 1, 2, 3, and 4. Is the plan that has been voted on by our planning commission one of those 4 options?
Yes. So the city of Pasco, as I mentioned, they had made an original application. It didn't get very far because there was immediate comment once we took it to public hearing from DOT and other agencies saying, wait, you have a lot to look into here if you're going to expand your urban growth area. I call it homework. You had to go back and do your homework. So the city did that. In that process, they did an environmental impact statement. And EIS requires the examination of different alternatives. They had to come up with 3 different alternatives for their EIS. Alternative 1 was no action. Alternative 2 was their original proposal. Alternative 3 was a new proposal, which was characterized as more compact growth and also infill development in areas where they already have areas within their urban growth area that haven't developed yet. So you could do infill development in those areas. That was called Alternative 3. If you review the record from the Planning Commission, that term Alternative 3 came up a lot. I just want to make it clear, and thank you, Mr. Johnson, that there are not 3 choices at this point in time before you. Rather, those were the 3 choices that went to the Pasco Planning Commission, Pasco City Council, and were examined through their EIS process. And now that Alternative 3 is what they voted on to carry forth through their application. So the application to Franklin County is what was Alternative 3. But we don't have 3 choices to vote on. That is their application. That's what's been submitted. County staff, Franklin County staff, and AHBL, we recommended a little refinement of the Pasco urban growth area expansion, pulling it back in 2 key areas. There was one area where, just because of some mapping, I guess it was unclear, where they had clipped into about 7 acres or so of resource lands. So we said that should be taken out. So it's a little squiggle around a crop circle, basically. And then near the airport, there was an area that they wanted to bring into their UGA that they were going to designate as airport reserve. And to us, it didn't make sense to bring something into the UGA if you were going to call it reserve and not give it development opportunities. So we said, let's take that out. Let's clean that up. Doesn't create a hole or anything like that, just a refinement of the area. So that was a subtraction of 28 acres or so, speaking off of memory. But basically what we've done is we've taken alternative 3, taken it to the planning commission with that, the refinements, the small changes, which we've discussed with their staff too. They were accommodating with it. They didn't have any objection to it. So that's where we wound up with that.
Okay, any
There
other
will be a
questions?
lot to digest.
So Nicole, when you were talking about the EIS done by the city, you said that they had 3 alternatives, I think is the term, not options, but one is always the no action, one is the current proposed, and then others. They could have had 3, 4, 5, 10 if they wanted. I just wanted to clarify that. But the differences between alternative 2, which was their first shot at it, and alternative 3, which is what ended up being approved by the planning commission, is in this packet. Aside from the things that you've mentioned today, were there any other significant changes? What I heard is that they pulled back some of the boundaries, more infill, more compact, maybe removed a little bit of resource lands, and then took out some acreage that wasn't going to be developed anyway, which was, I think, a very good call, because potential opponents of the plan will look at how much land is being consumed, and they tend to look at the new UGA boundaries and how much acreage is being added. And if it's acreage that won't be developed, there's no sense adding it. It just works against you. So thank you for catching that. I think as much as I've focused on airport lands and wanting to protect the airport, putting it in there doesn't do anything to protect the airport. It just makes your UGA look bigger than it really is.
Mm-hmm.
So looking forward to reading it. And yeah, I'm one of those weirdos who likes reading this stuff too. So thanks.
I'm sure I'll have questions after I read through this, so.
And we're available for any and all questions.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate everything
to
you
walk
put
through it.
together for us, so thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There is one other sort of 30,000 foot thing that might be useful for everybody. That's just sort of an overview of the timelines for the broad timelines under GMA for comp plans for what are called fully planning counties like ours. There was legislation proposed this year that would have, had it passed, changed some of those timelines. But maybe you could just give the big picture on when we last updated the comp plan, when it was due, and why this shows 20 years when the update is not a 20-year cycle.
Yes, thank you for that question. So the statutory deadline for the Franklin County update was June 30th of 2018. They put groups of counties on different cycles, in part because growth management services at the Department of Commerce is involved, and they want to be able to provide technical assistance and be available for help. So they phase it. So the last plan was adopted in 2008, and that was a 20-year plan, so that goes through 2028. State law requires an update every 10 years. So it's a 20-year time horizon of what you're planning for, but you know that 10 years from now, you'll be updating it yet again. Again, it's important to note that the UGA, it could have been changed between 2008 and now. There were no changes to that. I would also emphasize that the state law doesn't prescribe how often UGAs can be expanded, but many times counties will. So many times counties will come through and say, because it's an expensive and lengthy process, they'll say, well, we will only entertain UGA requests from cities certain years. Benton County has done that, for example. You have to wait several years if you want to have another go at it over there for UGA expansion. In our case, we have not limited that, but it does say that the county in the countywide planning policies says that I think even numbered years are the years that cities could come and bring forth a proposal. So this periodic update is not the final change to this and then it stays in place for 10 years. Not at all. The next periodic update will occur in 10 years, but counties can change their comprehensive plans annually. You can't do it more than 1 year, but you can do an annual update. And you can change a UGA, you can change a map, other language in the comprehensive plan, all of that's available options. Land use map changes can occur all the time through amendments. So you have the periodic update process every 10 years, and then you have yearly and annual amendments that are available to you. Some counties will even set up a work plan where they might go through certain elements on certain years to fine tune things. Because 10 years is an awful long time between periodic updates. They'll say, well, every 3 years we want to update our transportation piece because that's super important. Or we want to open up the housing element because we know affordable housing is a really big issue. So we're going to study that for this year and update that whole element as part of a county-initiated amendment process. That's certainly available as opportunities. That being said, I think it's important to note that this UGA expansion, it's a big request. It's certainly very consequential for the city of Pasco and Franklin County. There are some folks on the fringe or just outside the UGA area that will voice that they wish they were included. Certainly, like some of them were included in that alternative 2 that was originally done. And so they were maybe disappointed that the city changed plans under alternative 3 when they adopted it. I would emphasize that as new growth projections come out from the Office of Financial Management, it would be really important to keep a keen eye on those UGA areas. They come out with new estimates every 5 years. The last estimate was 2017. So next year already we'll be into a new forecast from the Office of Financial Management. So it may be another time just to look again at the UGA and say, are there areas that were missed that we should look at? In terms of timing for right now, the application and the request from the city of Pasco has gone through environmental review. Anything that's outside of that boundary has not gone through environmental review. So I would emphasize that this board would be able to pass and approve of the UGA as proposed and then later tweaked by county staff, brought back a little bit, because that's been covered in an environmental analysis. But if you wanted to add 20 acres here or shift it around, that's not been subject to environmental analysis. So we would have to wait until another year and we could ask a project proponent, the city or the county, to go forth with an environmental analysis so that those areas could be taken up if desired. It could be looked at. I would warn against deciding to make those changes based on the fact that it would be hard to defend that without an environmental analysis, is the bottom line.
Not to mention extremely costly. Staff time, and coordination, responding to various outside groups that have strong views on these.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, with that, we'll move down to public comment. Is there anyone in the room who would like to public comment? Anybody on the phone, Keith?
No, sir.
You just come and
Please, help yourself. Just step up to the mic.
Can I take this off?
Absolutely. so we can hear you.
All right. Very good. Thanks for your time today. My name is Cody Fielding, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you briefly. My business partners and I work in real estate, brokerage, and development with a primary focus here in the Tri-Cities. And I'm addressing you this morning to implore you to please adopt the comprehensive plan that we've been talking about as quickly as possible. We are experiencing a housing crisis in the Tri-Cities, and I don't use that word lightly. 5 years ago, a typical 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home, starter home, if you will, cost $130,000. Today, it is $350,000 or more, and growing literally by the day, it seems. And the market is as crazy as ever. There are 10, 20, even as high as 30 or more offers on homes within a few days of listing. Buyers are making offers well above asking price and certainly above appraised values because there simply are not enough homes on the market to meet buyer demand. Buyers are desperate and they are deflated, and most of them are losing out. And of course, there are those who can no longer afford a home and they struggle to find a suitable apartment to live in and to care for their families. We're fortunate to live in an area that is experiencing high growth. People are moving here for political reasons, because of our strong economy, our good weather, and other benefits that this area provides. It's imperative that we open up the urban growth to allow more housing for homeowners and for renters. I believe that you are the last vote in this lengthy process. Looking for a nod of approval. I think you are the last vote. We're very anxious to move forward and appreciate your help in expeditiously voting approval. I'll be honest, I was a little bit optimistic walking in here, not knowing the timeline beforehand, but we've got some clarification. I was hoping for a vote today. I didn't realize you hadn't maybe been presented with all the information. If June 1st is the earliest, it sounds like that might be the earliest timeline. That would be fantastic. The sooner the better. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Tracy Libbert, I just want to encourage you to adopt this on June 1st. As Cody mentioned, there's a big need for housing. Recently, there was a house had 24 offers on it in a 48-hour period. And so you wonder how many people are also sidelined just because they are aware, they read the newspaper, they're aware of the competition, and so they are sidelined. So there's probably many others out there that are looking for housing, and it's just not there. So I would encourage you to, by the time June 1st comes around, we'll be 3 years behind when this should have been adopted or could have been adopted. So I just would implore you to adopt this on June 1st and move things forward. So thank you for your service and for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Andrew Libbert. Thanks for the opportunity. I just checked the listings in the local MLS. 107 existing homes on the market and 57 new construction homes on the market. So we have to catch up. Those 23 buyers that didn't get that offer or that get that house, they're still looking for a house. And there's hundreds of other people that are looking for houses, and the only way to help that is to increase the supply. And so getting this comprehensive plan adopted and approved is the quickest way to help that supply start to increase. And it's still going to take time even from there. So I would implore you to vote on June 1st that night to get that ball rolling, because any further delay just keeps the snowball growing. And I honestly worry about home values being too high. And I worry about first I worried about a mini bubble, but now I'm starting to worry about a bigger bubble bursting, and we don't want that in Franklin County. And so helping get the supply to where it needs to be will help to stop the large appreciation that has been happening because of multiple offers, and people are even waiving inspections, doing crazy things that I would not suggest people do just to try and get a house so their family has a place to live. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Doc Stutter, and I agree with my compatriots in the real estate industry. We need to finally get this thing put behind us. But I would appreciate it if you would do a thorough study of what's been presented to you, because even if you vote on it June 1st, it's still going to be a year before sticks come out of the ground. The city has to annex the property. The city has to provide services, and they have no clue what the hell they're doing. So I want to get it done, but at this time, I don't think it's such a rush that you guys can't take the time to go through the information and hear your public comments at the workshop. Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody on the phone, Keith?
No.
And I would encourage everyone to go online and look through it too. And, you know, as we try to find everything in this book, this big book, we could use your help. Make sure we get this thing right.
I do want to say that I appreciate Nicole doing a thorough job. I've been watching this come through the city of Pasco for the last number of years, and I appreciate, Nicole, you being diligent with your presentation and study. And this is really important to our area. And as George said, it is, magic doesn't happen when you pass it. It's still a process after that. There's quite a lengthy process to annex it into the city and before sticks come out of the ground. So time is certainly helpful, but being diligent and thorough is also important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
could I ask a question of
absolutely.
these experts in the room? Since they're here, I'd like to take advantage of their knowledge. And that is give the board a little bit of an idea of the circumstances in Benton County. They're not currently modifying their comp plan. I think that's been done in Benton County. But for the benefit of all of us, are there more houses available? Are we having the same circumstance in Franklin County as Benton County, or what's the comparison since we're in kind of a regional economy?
This is a nationwide perversity or tragedy or whatever you want to call it, because when everybody shut down last March, that stopped all construction. So 90 days of starts. How many more houses could we have had on the market? But nationwide, the 1st of May, 856,000 homes for resale on the market. Since 1982, the lowest number it had ever been before then was 1.5 million. So it's not just here. It's everywhere you go. I've got family in Waco, Peoria. I got friends in Florida, all over in the business I talk to all the time. And it's the same everywhere you go, unless it's Podunkville out in the middle of nowhere. And then people are still buying there because they want a place to get away from the rat race. So it's not just our problem. It's everybody's problem. And the goofy laws that we pass in this state, just like no fossil fuels, added $20,000 to a price of home on the 1st of March because you can't use natural gas. And everybody here that's got natural gas, good luck when it comes to replacing your water heater. You're going to electric. So that and goofy deals like they want to do, shorten the blocks up in Pasco, that's going to increase the cost 20% on property. So you got to be careful what you pass because that affects the price of affordability.
I'll make a comment regarding the Benton County question. It feels to me like, and I'm open to hear differing opinions, but in Benton County, there is more land available. It's just restricted by getting utilities to the sites. I'm thinking specifically regarding Badger Mountain South and South Richland, one of the biggest areas in Richland where there's a high growth opportunity, and it's basically restricted by just getting guys out there and dirt and money to put the infrastructure in. One point of clarification, I guess I do agree with Mr. Docksetter and Mr. Bowman. Absolutely, it takes a long time to get sticks up after this process. If it's on the outskirts of town and hasn't been annexed in, but part of this comprehensive update does include infill projects where utilities are already there so that the lots are shovel ready. And basically just need, so let me clarify, there are properties that have the underlying land use changing the designation, which will allow for single family or multifamily opportunities that don't exist today. And those properties can come up a lot faster. Just a matter of rezoning and then just, getting permits and starting to build. So I feel like from that perspective, there is a sense of urgency because there's a shorter timeline for those infill projects than the bigger parcels on the outskirts of town.
Thank you.
I might just add to that, there are land use changes, underlying land use changes that are being held hostage currently to the comprehensive plan because those cannot take place when the comprehensive plan is being updated. So if the comprehensive plan, if we weren't in the comprehensive plan update, then those changes within the city, those land use changes could take place. But now they can't and haven't been able to for the past 3 years.
Thank you. All right. Is there anybody on the phone, Keith?
Not yet.
And anybody else in the room? Nicole, I just want to say nice job. Very well presented. And thank you for all the hard work. With that, then, I guess we'll move on to office business office business. I think we've got one voucher.
Chairman, give me excuse if you'd like.
Absolutely. You can come and go freely. Thank you.
Yes, we have one voucher before us. Fund expenditures, move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $136,159.45 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by 2 representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, consent agenda. I believe there are 11 items on the consent agenda this morning.
Move for approval of consent agendas 1 through 11.
Second with discussion.
We have a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda with discussion. Please go ahead, Commissioner Peck.
So item 1 is titled Intergovernmental Agreement G7117 for combined state and local voters pamphlet. If memory serves, in the termination clause for the contract, it says that if there's a termination for convenience, not for cause, there's a 120-day window, normally in a T for C, termination for convenience. The county would be obligated to pay for any expenses incurred up to the date of notice of termination. But again, memory serves from reading it, it's been a few days, but I think it says that the county is responsible for costs incurred from the point of notice for an additional 120 days. And so I'm wondering if I in fact read and interpreted that correctly. And if so, why would we, after giving notice of termination on a contract, then make ourselves liable for additional expenses that the state might incur over the next 3 months related to our county?
Who would we direct that question
That
to?
would
The
be
auditor's office?
Auditor's office.
Is,
Mr. Chairman, can I
yeah,
respond to that?
Yep.
I'm reading provision A under paragraph 5 where it says termination. It says the county shall be liable only for its share of costs relating to voter pamphlet costs incurred prior to the effective date of termination.
Well, that
So
sounds
that's
clear enough. What's the reference to 120 days that I'm
It says the
remembering?
agreement may be terminated by either party with 120 calendar day written notice to the other party's authorized representative. So I think what you're saying is probably correct, that during that 120-day period, it says incurred prior to the effective day of termination. I don't know if that's the.
Well, that's the question now, isn't it? What's the
Yeah.
effective date? Is it the date that you give notice, or is
Or
it
the day it's
120 days
terminated?
later? I read it as 120 days later. Otherwise, it would kind of be a moot point to even put that in there.
do we have anybody from the auditor's office on the line?
I don't think the risk is great. It's just that when I read contracts, I look pretty carefully at termination clauses, because if you end up in a bad contract,
Yeah.
you at least want to make sure you've got a solid termination clause. And that one seemed out of character from what I've seen in the past.
Well, do you want to pull this from the agenda to,
I would
don't-
recommend that we amend the motion for approval of the consent. In fact, I'll move to amend the motion to approve the consent agenda to remove item 1 for future consideration.
I'll second that.
been a motion and a second on an amendment to remove item 1 from the consent agenda? All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. With that, I would like discussion on item 2, which is the RV park rental rate increase. And my question on this is, it's been mentioned in here that we're in competition with these other RV parks. And I think that that is a conflict for a government entity to be in competition. And my question is there any just cause for keeping this under our direction, or could we possibly entertain the thought of selling the RV park?
I'll respond to that the best I can. It goes back a long ways. The RV park was initially put into place to accommodate a lot of the horse trailers and weekenders that would come for events at the track or the Happel Center. That need has changed over time, and in fact, it turned into more of an RV park for residents to stay there. The RV park profits do help us fund our costs for the Happel Center. And so there is a programmatic benefit to having the RV park as part of the Happel Center complex. Even though they're separate organizations, we account for the funds separately. That's the county's purpose in having the RV park, is to help offset the cost or reduce the cost of having the Happel Center. Having said that, we have been aware of the nature of the competition amongst RV parks. RV parks have exponentially grown in demand in the last few years, and particularly during COVID. It's very difficult to find RV park space. So our level of competition is fairly minimal, and part of the purpose of raising our rates out of the park is to make sure that those who are in the market for looking for an RV park space would perhaps look at other available parks first before coming to Franklin County. But we're well aware that all of the parks have waiting lists right now, and they're full and are able to basically charge whatever they want. We are not the most expensive in town, but we also don't have all of the amenities that some of the other parks have. But we are trying to make sure that we're cognizant. We study the rates of the other parks. We gather that regularly to make sure that we're not unfairly competing against those. And so far, our relationship with those other parks has been very positive. They understand the situation we're in, and they don't complain about us taking business away from them. And so we're cognizant of the issue, but in the big picture, should government own an RV park? That's a policy question for the board to decide.
I'd like to hear from the other board members on this. Do you have any comments on this?
I have spoken out against entrepreneurial government for as long as I've been a commissioner. I don't think that the government should ever be in competition in the private sector against the public unless there is a clear shortage of supply or services in the private sector, and then the government is complementing that to meet the needs of constituents. Everything Mr. Johnson said is accurate to my knowledge of the history. Several years ago, I began pushing on the idea that we need to do an annual survey of other RV parks and make sure that we are more expensive than them, not less, to minimize that undue competition. I've never had a complaint from another RV park, I think because they've heard us talk about this and seen what we've done to mitigate competition. If we were to sell it, we'd be trading one-time money, which tends to evaporate quickly, against an asset that is providing revenue on an annual basis that I would say probably offsets about $100,000 a year in track expenses. Now that's saving the city of Pasco about $50,000, saving us about $50,000 because we share equally in the losses, at least for now. That's assuming the city renews the contract for the track that's coming up. So if we were to ever entertain selling it, we'd have to realize that we're going to be cutting our own revenue stream, and the status quo seems acceptable to the local marketplace. And sale of the RV park probably should be part and parcel of a sale of the whole property, if and when that ever became the right thing to do.
Commissioner Mullen?
I'm in agreement that we need to make sure that we are not undercutting the other RV parks in town. One thought, I don't know if anybody has looked at, but the option of possibly leasing the entire RV park to a private entity. Therefore, we would still regain ownership, but would not handle the day-to-day operations. We would sell that, or lease that to a private company and remove ourselves from it. That would be the only other option that I would take a look at. I agree that if we sell it, I think the money will disappear rather quickly. So the residual income would be a great benefit to the county, I believe.
Okay. So with that, hearing no further action on that, we have a motion on the floor for the approval of items 2 through 11 on the consent agenda, and number 1 has been removed for further discussion. So all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, with that, I believe we have a 10 o'clock executive meeting with John. So Keith, if you'd like to call that executive session.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would request an executive session under RCW 42.30.110, paragraph 1, subparagraph I, to discuss with legal counsel litigation or potential litigation. Would ask that prosecuting attorney Sean Sant with the board, myself, the clerk, and John Safarli and Jen Johnson be allowed to participate. Probably up to 45 minutes. Well, we didn't have much time, Sean, you think?
I think we have that time, yeah.
Okay.
If we were able to start by 10, he would have a little bit of flexibility, but that should be reasonable.
Request up to 45 minutes with the option to extend if necessary.
Is there anybody needing a bathroom break? We good? Okay, Mike's. Okay, we've come out of executive session with no decisions being made. And the next item on the agenda is administration office business.
Yeah, I noticed Kyle Sullivan's here with us today, so maybe I'll go just a little bit out of order from the agenda and have the discussion on the criminal justice treatment account. Kyle, if you wouldn't mind stepping to the microphone. This is something that Kyle's office has been directly involved with for some time for Franklin County. He and I have spoken about this, and I invited him to participate just to kind of brief the board on where we are and some actions that we intend to take.
And so the CJTA, it stands for Criminal Justice Treatment Account, and it's funding that the counties used to control through my office back prior to the integration of mental health and SUD services and terming them behavioral health services now. When those contracts went back to, at the time, it was Greater Columbia Behavioral Health Organization, the management of those funds went with it. Here a couple of years ago, the Healthcare Authority started reaching out to the counties. Every couple of years, they reach out to the counties and ask if it's something that they would like to take oversight again over. In Greater Columbia Behavioral Health, there's, out of all the, I believe there's 8 counties that participate in the organization. Walla Walla is the only county that selects to retain and to administer the funding on their own. It's used for treatment dollars, primarily, at least in our counties, with the drug courts. And so that's what came up again. A letter was sent out requesting counties' decision on whether or not they would like to have it remain the same, where Greater Columbia oversees the management of the contract, or if they would like to retain oversight of that specifically within the county. And so the letter that they sent out requested notification by, I believe it's the 24th of this month. So I talked with Keith about this last week, and he requested that I show up today to have a discussion and answer any questions that you might have on it.
Commissioners, questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
Kyle, there's an admin fee on that money that comes down from the state that currently goes to GCBH, previously went to your office.
Correct.
Do you recall what that percentage is?
Off the top of my head, I want to say 10%, but it's around there, 8, 10, something like that. There are reporting requirements within the state. At the time, we had a specific employee that oversaw the reporting requirements with regard to the CJTA funds, as well as at that time, we oversaw the contracts for SUD services in both counties.
Yeah. Because we have a joint court and because we have a shared human services function, I would be concerned about us administering CGTA dollars at the county level as opposed to in a cooperative by county approach. So my answer to your question is I wouldn't want to see it leave Greater Columbia unless we could do it in a cooperative by county approach. The dollars, as I recall, would be earmarked by county anyway, right?
Correct.
So it's not like Benton money could be spent in Franklin or vice versa. The 10%, would that be enough of an administrative fee for you to cover your costs and staffing? That's question one. And question two, assuming it was sufficient, is it something you'd be interested in doing or something you would recommend we do?
It was, I don't believe, and I would need to do a kind of a deeper dive as to all the reporting requirements. I know it works well the way it is right now. The Merit is the primary drug court provider, and so all of those the dollars historically in our community had been from the providers that we had been difficult to spend. There are strings attached with the dollars. Merit had done a pretty good job. The previous agency that used to have the sole contract through Greater Columbia for administration of the CJTA dollars reached out a few years ago, indicated they did not want to continue to have access to that funding just simply because of the reporting requirements and the strings and whatnot. So Merit came down and opened a shop down here with access to that funding, and quite frankly, has done a pretty good job. The system works well right now. I was in Benton County last week, and my recommendation was to them to continue to have the dollars administered through Greater Columbia Behavioral Health, and that's what my recommendation would be here. I don't believe that the admin fees would be enough to support a full-time employee.
Okay, well, that's really what I want to know. If it's not cost effective for your office, then as far as I'm concerned, that's where the conversation ends, because GCBH has already got a structure. From what I can see, it works.
It does.
I don't see a reason to change, but I didn't want to just jump to that conclusion without hearing you out. So
Sure.
I support your recommendation. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
What is the size of the budget on that?
I can get that to you off the top of my head. I want to say it's under $100,000 a year for Benton County or for Franklin County. I think Benton County was a couple $100,000. But again, when I get back to my office, I'll shoot you an email with the specific amount. I can't recall that off the top of my head.
All right, thank you.
No questions. You've answered them all.
Okay. And so then can I receive direction from the board to go ahead and send an email or letter to the Healthcare Authority indicating that Franklin County's position is to keep it the same?
Just a consensus is needed?
Yeah.
I believe we're all on board.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Keith?
Yes, the next item is a couple of letters that we have been requested to provide supporting a couple of items from the federal earmark program or community funding project. This is due to some recent changes in the administration and legislation, how it's gone at the federal level, and our congressional delegation being active in pursuing projects in our area. One letter, it's being asked of the city of Pasco to be sent to Congressman Newhouse and Senators Cantwell and Murray. It's an identical letter. It's support for federal funding for the Broadmoor and Road 100 corridor transportation and safety improvement plans. We've talked a little bit about this and how important that is to the growth of Pasco and Franklin County. This is a specific request for $4 million to build a roundabout at the intersection of Broadmoor Boulevard and Burns Road in anticipation of that additional development that's going on in that area. And so that's one letter. The other letter comes from the it's to Senator Murray from us representing the Odessa Groundwater Replacement Program. Effort to add, I think it was, it's a couple of requests. One, to construct the system on the East Lobe Canal, and then completion of the Columbia Basin project. And this was specifically requested that the commissioners support that effort in their request to Senator Murray. So if you're amenable to signing those letters, I can get those sent out today.
Is there a consensus with the commissioners?
I'm in support of both letters.
I'm not a traffic engineer. I'm not convinced that a roundabout at Burns and Road 100 is necessarily the right answer, but it is in the city, and it's going to be their design. And I view the letter mostly as a request for funds, and so I can support both.
Okay. Very good.
You got anything more on the agenda, Keith?
I don't believe I have anything else that needs discussion this morning.
Okay, so we're to the public comment. Is there any other? Go ahead.
I noticed Mr. Beaton, the
Yes.
county auditor, came in. He may want to speak to the earlier item we pulled
Yes,
off.
the item one that got pulled from the agenda.
Yeah, I'm hoping you guys put that back in. It's a standard contract. So that contract is, county's compelled by law to provide pamphlet services, services. We've had that in place for 10 years. It's a relationship with the Secretary of State that saves the taxpayers of Franklin County and the districts anywhere upwards of 50%. The cost ranges from about $1,500 to $9,000. As to the questions, it sounded to me like there were some questions about the contract itself.
The 120 day is what was.
Whatever. My point is we sent that to legal. It's a state contract that's given to us. We don't have any negotiation right on it. I can tell you, we've had a fantastic relationship with them. It's saved us money, and I have no comment on the contractual jargon. I have faith in the civil department upstairs that if there was something that was unusual or created great risk, that they would alert me to that. So
a question I have on this is that I was told that the state is no longer going to print these pamphlets, and it was going to be the county's expense. How does this correlate with that?
Well, we are responsible for providing these.
Right.
And this relationship that we've had with the Secretary of State, they're not allowing any new counties to actually join in and get the economies of scale for the general election.
Okay.
So we're out right now we have to print one for every election. It doesn't matter. School, every district does. And so it's a pass through. And so, but this particular relationship is greatly advantageous, and we are hopeful to be able to continue it. So, it's a little bit like a credit card contract. You could probably dig through that and find something that's, wait a minute, I could get stuck. But
Okay.
The bottom line is we're going to be compelled, and I would hope that you guys would.
So what about the primary election? As I heard a lot of concern from voters that they didn't even know who to vote on because
No,
there's
that's
no pamphlet.
the
Are we
law
going to put
passed,
out a
and we're
primary?
out right now. Yeah, we're going to have every election. So the primary,
Okay.
the school
But that
bond.
will be our expense then.
It'll be the expense of the districts that are, that participate in that election. So at times, yes, it will be Franklin County for Franklin County elected offices, but whether, school board, and they're all the
Yes.
same taxpayer, but the bottom
Right.
line is that, those pass-through costs will, but this is a great relationship that we have with them. And in fact, the contracts we're looking at now for just this small, for the upcoming primary are greater than the general contract costs we've had for the last decade. So this goes without saying. So I hope you'll just pass it. The questions, if you have questions on them and you're curious about the minutia of contract law, I'm sure, the prosecutor or Prosecutor Johnson can talk to you about that. But we have to do it. And so I'm like, I hope please keep having us is basically where I'm at.
Is there any other questions?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, several. First off, what I heard is we've always done it this way, so it's the right way to do it. That's nonsense. Two, the prosecutor's office does not look at contracts for the quality of the contract and the interest of the county. They look at it to see if it's legally sufficient as to form. It's our duty to look at these contracts and say, is this a good deal for the county? If we're not looking at least the termination clause of contracts, and oh, by the way, it's not minutia, it's our job, then we're missing the boat. There have been a number of contracts over the years where it really hasn't been in the county's best interest, and we've gone back to the state. And you're right, there aren't a whole lot of times that they're flexible, but at least they can explain the necessity for it. So what I raised today was the question of what does this language mean, because it wasn't particularly clear. Not so much advocating that we change it, but to understand that if we approve it, this is the extent of our liability, and this is what we might be paying for. We might be perfectly fine with that because, as you say, it's probably a good financial deal for us not to have to do it ourselves. But it's our job to understand what these contracts say, and it's not minutia. So thanks. And Mr. Chairman, I was the one that asked to pull it with the explanation. I don't think that the risk is that great. I simply want a clarification before I voted on something. If it's the will of the board to bring it back up and pass it today, I'm fine with that as well. But I'd want to know from Mr. Beaton, is there some urgency that this couldn't be addressed next week?
It's on our list of things to get done. I don't know what the I would ask why you would put it off. I mean, I guess that's my question. To me, look, I'm separately elected. I read the contract. I know the costs. I know that if we were to, terminate, I know the impact of it. Like I said, this has cost us as little as $1,500, as much as $9,000. With the same responsibility that each of you have. Yeah, I reviewed it, and again, we sent it upstairs to form, and the form is, as I think what you're talking about, which, unless I'm mistaken, but no, I would ask that, yeah, you would approve it today. I mean, it's administrative in nature, and we want to get it done so we can get on to the next thing.
So you're mistaken when you say that you have the same responsibility that we do. You don't approve the contract. You make recommendations. Obviously, you're recommending we approve it. And I'm willing to accept what I think is a relatively small risk. But I am going to stand on the point that we have a duty to read these contracts and know what it is we're approving. And the fact is, convenient for your schedule or not is of some interest to me, but it's not the deciding factor. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll defer to you. If you want to move it today, we can do that. That's fine, or we can do it next week.
Commissioner Mullen, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. I move that we go ahead and approve it.
Approve item 1 of the consent agenda.
Yes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Motion and a second to approve item 1 of the consent agenda, which is resolution 2021-094. Discussion.
I suspect the contract is probably fine. We have done it this way for a number of years. I'm going to vote no, just on principle that we have a section in the termination clause that is unclear. I suspect there's 2 votes to move it forward, so I don't see any harm to the county in voting no on it. Thanks.
Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Let it be known. Okay, so we're down to public comment. Is there any public comment? Anybody on the phone, Keith?
You have one
Okay.
caller on the phone, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. Okay.
Good morning. Is this
Good
Lawanda?
morning. Yes, it is. How are you today?
Great. You have the floor for 4 minutes. Please go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I am just calling. First of all, I wanted to thank the commissioners for last week voting to approve a redistricting commission. I am really grateful for that because I think that the more citizens that we can get involved in our government, the better. I know I've been asking for it since last February myself, and so I really am truthfully grateful for that. I also understand someone was witness to an unsanctioned meeting after last week's meeting, and I guess I'm not exactly clear on the law, but I just think that when I just feel that our commissioners need to be more respectful of the process and the part where the people are involved. And I know with the Open Meetings Act, it is vital that all meetings be declared, minutes taken, and discussion recorded. So I just didn't know how that went and what happened exactly, but it is of great concern to me because it was having to do with the Redistricting Commission. So that is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the phone?
No.
Anybody else for public comment? Please step forward.
I've got a couple things I'd like to talk about real quick. One, the EIS on the comprehensive plan was done on the original 5,000 acres. So it wasn't done on just the property and option C. It was done beforehand when Dave McDonald was in charge of the deal. And the other thing I want to talk about, I just came into
Mr.
this.
Dockstetter, would you mind a question? Because I think
No.
what you just said is really important. I want to make sure I got it right.
I wrote it down.
You said the original EIS was done on the 5,000 acres,
That-
which was alternative C?
No,
B.
it was the original plan presented to the Franklin County Commissioners 2 years ago, or almost 3.
Right.
And it was sent back to the city for whatever reasons you sent it back for. I don't
There
know.
were
I
long
wasn't
listed-
involved
Yeah.
with Dave McDonald at that time. And then I came on board and started getting involved. But it was my understanding the EIS was done on the original application
5,000.
for the whole 5,000 acres, not just alternative C, which is the 1 or 3, whatever, however they're calling it.
Yeah,
Option
the
option
first
A
was
is
no action alternative.
no action. Option B basically took in probably another 200 to 300
That was
acres.
the first proposal.
Yeah, and then option C is the one that's before you now.
And that's what they're also calling option 3. And
Yeah,
that's what
option 3,
that's what I
yes.
wanted to get clarified.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Well, they're
Okay,
calling it alternative. three.
alternatives.
And alternative is the right term.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to talk about, I just got this, Pasco's proposed new ordinance on street connectivity. And all it talks about in the first 3 pages is Ben Franklin Transit. How we're gonna make the roads better so everybody can ride the friggin' bus. And I know you two sit on the board or whatever it is, oversight deal. We need to cut their doggone budget and get them back into reality. This thing's all about walking to catch the bus, taking the bus out there to wherever you're going, getting people to quit driving cars. It's a proven fact nationwide, and we're no different here. If anything, we're higher. 67% of the people drive to work. And they're not going to ride the bus because they're inconvenient, wrong times. Nobody wants to stand out there in the rain. And the other thing about the Transit Authority, $2.5 million to redo the parking lot there on Road 22. Give me a break. There's not that many buses there except when they pick up for the fair and rodeo. And the third thing I want to mention, I'd like to see you not sign the letter for the roundabout at Burns Road and Road 100. Talk about a disaster.
Yeah.
The traffic pattern out there is going to do nothing but get worse. And when those guys, like my neighbors, drive down a road with a 4-row potato digger heading across the river, it's just going to be a mess. Or you got hay trucks that are 90 foot long going through there. They'll never make the roundabout. So I'd like to see you withdraw from the letter of support on the roundabout at Road 100. Thank you for your time.
So Keith, with that, June 2nd, we have a meeting at the Hapo Center by county on the Ben Franklin Transit funding, the
June
0.6 of 1%. Yes.
Open to the public.
Open to the public.
Okay.
And on the roundabout, are we locked into that roundabout? I mean, we're asking for funding. We're not locked into a roundabout. We can
Not
have a
necessarily.
discussion on that later, right?
Sure.
Yes.
I just think.
I'm not for a roundabout.
Well, I know what step-toe is.
Yeah.
And get off the Blue Bridge trying to go to Columbia Drive. There is hardly room for a semi truck
That's right.
to get around there, let alone somebody pulling doubles. So when they don't have 4-row potato diggers or guys going out there with fumigating machines, pulling something that's 75, 80 foot long behind them. And we're still an agricultural community,
Yes.
even though we're changing and changing rapidly. We still have a lot of people that use that road for agriculture. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, is there any other business for the good of the county?
I
Here.
had a call in from David Cartinez about the redistricting. He would like to serve on the redistricting committee. So he just reached out to me to voice his opinion in that he's the president of the Latin Business Association, which is 100% Latino from Pasco. And so he just wanted to reach out and say he is interested and would like to be on the redistricting committee.
So each commissioner gets to pick someone, whoever's district he lives in, consider him. I don't know his address.
I got the same contact from him.
I believe he lives in Mr. Peck's district.
Okay. All righty, with that, is there anything else for the good of the board? Or the good of the county, I should say? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.